while I have you, I want to ask about the other story I saw in the past week, if you don't mind. I mean, we'll call this chapter 2, but Alexis Ohanian.
Yes.
One of my favorite people in this space because he always has lots to say. Talk about a little bit about what he's doing, because he has been somebody that people look to as...
Alexis was a really fun profile that I did a week or two ago. And, I try not to go into my reporting with preconceived ideas of what the story's going to be. So I had an opportunity to sit down for an extended conversation with Alexis. I went to his farm around the corner from where he and
I think farm
Serena
man
Williams
cave
live.
is the term, right? Yeah.
The farm man cave is more accurate.
Yeah.
And we kind of sat down with very little...
like, what up?
Yeah. We were just hanging out a bit. I obviously had done my research. I knew about his investment portfolio. But I was really interested that when I asked him like how he got to where he is so that he was able to make one of the very first investments in Coinbase, which ended up being a great investment. How he got to the point where he was able to buy at Ethereum's pre-sale, making him one of the very few people that got in at that very, 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 very early stage. His answer to that question kind of surprised me. He literally gestured to the floor around him at these gorgeous Armenian rugs that were underneath his desk. And these rugs had been recently purchased. His family's inheritance, which
he's from Armenia.
His family is Armenian. And Armenian families have a tradition of handing down rugs for generations, centuries. And his inheritance had been seized during what we now call the Armenian genocide.
Yeah.
And several of his family members were killed. His grandfather narrowly avoided being murdered by soldiers who had just decapitated his father. And his aunt sat him down when he was 6 years old and told him this story. And it resonated with him, the value of assets that can't be seized, the value of being able to own something that doesn't rely on an institution that can be controlled by a potentially corrupt government. And in 2014, 2015, 2016, when the Coinbases of the world were starting to get traction, when some of the very first investments were being made, he was there, and it really stuck with him, going back to what we were talking about with how the German government could actually hold these assets without needing a bank. That's the same for all of these digital assets. They can all be held without a bank. And so it was actually the difficulty to seize these assets that really stood out to Alexis and led to him being one of the very first investors in the space. Now, it's an important caveat to make that these assets are only seizure resistant if you are managing your own keys, if you are holding your own private keys. If you are relying on an exchange, if you are relying on a bank, if you are relying on some other middleman that can help you find your password when you forget it, they have your private keys, and they can be compelled to hand over assets just like any other organization underneath the power of a government. In fact, while I was researching that story, I found a lawyer in Florida who 2 years prior had 0 cryptocurrency seizure cases. And a year later, 20% of her clientele were cryptocurrency seizures. Most of those were civil, which means that the government was able to take them and keep them without a trial. And unless you decide and or have the resources to fight it, they just have your assets. And so this particular lawyer out in Florida really sees government, particularly civilian seizures of cryptocurrency, as something that untowardly affects the poorer investors.
Well, it's ironic because the genesis of the currency is to get around government and central banks and,
I think people are learning that lesson big time right now. And to go back to your other points about the domino effect of failures in the traditional banking world. And we'll throw out some crypto companies as well. You mentioned FTX, but BlockFi, Celsius, a number of others have all imploded. Those are failures of central management. Those are failures of chief executives, managing directors. Those are failures of what we call traditional centralized finance.
Yeah.
And the same kinds of bad investment decisions that were made at FTX are being made at banks around the world, and vice versa. What we're seeing as these collapses are happening, first of all, very interestingly, the price of Bitcoin is going up. Bitcoin's gone up something like 38% in the last week and a half.
Yeah.
It's gone up, I think, 68% this year. It is by far the best performing asset of the year. And that is as everything else is going down, as banks are closing, as centralized cryptocurrency exchanges are going bankrupt. And we've seen some evidence, though, it's very early, and I don't think you want to overstate this, that one of the lessons that is being learned is self-custody. People are learning that they're not trusting these institutions.
Until they come to your door, and then it's like hand it over, right?
It's a very good point. I always joke with people, but there's some truth to it. I like being able to call somebody up when I forget my password. God knows I'm going to forget it.
Yeah.
And I like having somebody that I can call and ask that question. Now, the risk is that I have to trust those people that they're handling my savings responsibly.
Just don't use it to sell meth, and you'll probably be okay. I think that's the lesson in all this.
Or have more than $250,000, at which point
yes.
the FDIC insurance isn't supposed to help you
No,
out.
but we now believe it will. So
there might be an infinite
Thank you,
ceiling.
Silicon Valley Bank, for that. Good to talk with you.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thanks.